Today, I want to talk about Iran. And the reason why is because recently there has been a monumental buildup of troops in the area. And so I think it is probably not surprising to anyone paying attention that there have been increasing signs that we are probably headed toward some sort of military conflict, and in my opinion, probably a prolonged one. So not like the ones that we saw previously, where we had the 12-day war, where we went in and we struck their nuclear facilities, these sorts of things. I don't think it's going to look like that. I think it will be at a much larger scale. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at all of the warning signs that are pointing in that direction, and then why it is so significant to all of us. So let's get into it. Hi there, pardon the interruption. I just wanted to make a real quick ask that if you are watching my content and you appreciate it, if you could please drop me a subscription. As you can see, through the life of my channel, 95% of the people that watch my content are not subscribed. So if you are watching and you find yourself enjoying the content, I would ask that you drop a subscription. Just, again, a really quick PSA, it would mean a lot to me. It really does help my channel grow, and it allows me to make this something that I can do for a living. So just wanted to take a real quick interruption, and I'll return you back to my video. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy.
But let's go ahead and start off with Iran. Just a titanic amount of U.S. military assets arriving in the Middle East, some not seen since the Iraq War and the Gulf War before that. It's very much reminiscent of the military buildup around Venezuela before the operation to kidnap Nicolas Maduro. Professor John Mearsheimer was...
And just really quick on that, yes, and the thing is, too, is that the important thing to keep in mind is that they were pulling away assets from other regions around the globe. So they pulled ships away from Venezuela, which there is a blockade that is still in effect there. And then they pulled ships away from China/Taiwan as well, that area. And they're moving them all over into the Middle East. And basically in preparation, most likely, to strike Iran. And so when you are seeing that happen, that is the thing where I think it really shows the hand that, yes, there is probably something significant that is going to happen here, is because it's not like these were just ships that were kind of milling around or they were in ports and they weren't really being used for anything significant or useful in general. No, these were things that were already deployed in other areas, and in some cases pretty far away, and they're moving them all the way to the Middle East, right? Because if you're going from Venezuela, like, that's right in our backyard. So you're moving it literally halfway around the world to put it in position for strikes on Iran or some sort of military action. And so when you are seeing that, I think it makes it pretty much a no-brainer that there's going to be some sort of meaningful military action taken here.
Reacting to all of this yesterday. Let's take a listen.
And Israel wants zero enrichment capability. They want the whole nuclear enrichment infrastructure taken down. They want Iran to eliminate all the ballistic missiles it has that can hit Israel. They want Iran to give up supporting the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas. And these are demands that there's no way the Iranians are going to accept. So even if Trump can work out a deal that's satisfactory to him along the lines I described before, it's not going to satisfy the Israelis. And the Israelis have made it very clear that they will attack Iran alone if that is necessary. And of course, if they attack Iran, there's no way we don't get involved, because we're going to then have to help defend Israel when the Iranians start launching ballistic missiles at Israel. And also, we're going to get involved because the Iranians are in all likelihood going to try to shut down the Straits of Hormuz and stop the flow of oil out of the Persian Gulf. So I don't see what Trump can do.
So Professor Mearsheimer's warning there about what this is all really about and some of the bigger stakes. This all comes, again, as all of these military assets, which we're about to show you, are arriving in the Persian Gulf and in the surrounding Middle East. You also have U.S. assets.
And just to kind of tack on to what he said there, yes, I think the problem is that it's basically the U.S. is being pinched on two sides. And this is why I constantly will say anytime I talk about the Middle East in general that we should just completely remove ourselves from the situation. And this is going to sound very uncouth, but let them all Highlander each other. There can be only one, because they all hate each other at just a base religious zealot level. Like they all hate each other, and there's no way. It's like if you think about the Hatfields and McCoys kind of a thing in the U.S., where it's like these two families that just hate each other and there's no real reasoning. They just are trying to, shoot each other and attack each other, and there's no reasoning with them. That's the entire region over there. Because it's even within the same religion, there can be sects that hate each other. It would be like if in the United States, the Catholics and the Christians and the Protestants and the Baptists and all these were all at war with each other, and they hated each other for just because they were a part of that religion, or because their bloodlines, or because of it's immutable characteristics, and it goes way back, and they're so deeply indoctrinated in it from the time that they were born that there's no pulling them apart. It's like rabid dogs, essentially. And I'm not calling them dogs. I'm not trying to demean them, but it's just the saying. It's like rabid dogs fighting with each other. Like, you can't pull them apart. You can't make them see reason. And so the problem with us essentially now being caught in the middle, I think Iran has been incredibly measured so far in the actions that they have taken. But yeah, when they're trying to fight each other, that's exactly it. Is because, okay, even if we make a deal with Iran, all of the things that, because just imagine if a country came to us and gave us the same, hey, you have to follow, here's the terms that we want from you. Like if they came to the United States and they're like, okay, you can't have ballistic missiles, you're not allowed to have nuclear power, you're not all the things that we're basically trying to force onto Iran. It's a non-starter. That's completely, it's farcical to think that any country would be willing to submit to the terms, because, and this is exactly it, they would have no way to defend themselves, and then Israel could just go in and walk all over them. Okay, if we can't strike back for the bad actions that you're taking, if you can just bomb us and we can't do anything about it, what? That makes absolutely no sense. So, of course, as John Mearsheimer was laying out, Israel's trying to put in all these things that are maximalistly beneficial for them and provide no benefit to Iran whatsoever. Because as soon as they agree to it, us and Israel, or Israel by itself, because they'll be so, Iran will be so defanged, Israel could just strike them and there would be no recourse that they would have. So of course they're not going. It's 100% poison pills. It's made so that they, of course, will not accept the terms by any means. Of course, right? That's just a no-brainer. And then they're threatening, Israel, are threatening to go in and bomb them. And then, of course, that would drag us in because all of our Congress is completely cucked to Israel. And they're all bought and paid for. So, and or the military-industrial complex. So, of course, we'll rush to our greatest allies' aid. And even though it is obviously not in the United States' best interest. So, yes, it's a very difficult position that the United States is forced into, or that we have gotten ourselves into. Once again, I don't understand why. I do, but strategically, it doesn't make any sense why we are so willing to support Israel in their seemingly, in my opinion, manic foreign policy or local policy, however you want to label that. But again, this is not beneficial to the United States at all. And to the first point that I made, it has made us pull assets away from other areas in the world where those troops and or ships and all of those things are better served in the interests of the United States. Like, okay, so now if China decides to move on Taiwan, what are we doing? Like, we don't have chips anymore. Like, we don't have the advanced chips. We can't even create weapons anymore, missiles and bombs and these sorts of things, because we don't have the advanced chips that go into them. Like, you don't think that's a greater concern for us than whatever Israel is doing, their own homicidal tendencies, or suicidal, I'll call it, right? Because they're what else can you call it? I mean, they know that we're going to back them up, so it's not actually that, but it seems like it. Like, if you're picking fights with larger countries that are not completely backwards and have a military, like they can actually defend themselves, and they have a much larger population, I don't know what else you call that. And or Venezuela, where it seems like things are probably mostly under control. But again, those things, and whether you think they're right or wrong, I think both of those areas are more important to U.S. interests than anything happening in the Middle East.
Assets and service members, non-essential personnel being evacuated from these bases. All signs are currently pointing to this. The White House was asked about yesterday whether they would strike Iran or not, and they certainly would neither not rule it out, but said there's a lot of good reasons to do so. Let's take a listen to the press secretary.
Can you share a little bit about the president's thinking on whether or not to strike Iran, who he's talking to, what information he's consuming, and why a strike might be necessary on a nuclear program he says was obliterated by the last U.S. strike?
Well, there's many reasons and arguments that one could make for a strike against Iran. The president had a very successful operation as commander-in-chief with Operation Midnight Hammer, as you know, as you just said, totally obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities.
And that statement makes no sense whatsoever, because if that were true, then why do we need to put them down to 0% enrichment? They're not capable of creating any sort of nuclear, even for power plants, right? They don't even have nuclear for power plants because we destroyed it all, right? So then how is this one of the things that are in our negotiations if we supposedly already destroyed all of that? And then the other thing that's funny about his question is, this seems... Again, it just seems like, were you lying to us then that you destroyed it completely? Or are you lying to us now that they need to destroy it in order for us to reach a settlement with them? Just completely confusing. And then, the other thing that's a complete joke is there are many reasons why we could go to war, we should go to war with, or strike Iran. And it's like, okay, did you give us any of them? Like, if it were me and I were in her job and there was actually good reasons why, well, I would just list them out because it would just make sense. But there are no reasons, and so this is the answer that we get.
The president has always been very clear, though, with respect to Iran or any country around the world. Diplomacy is always his first option, and Iran would be very wise to make a deal with President Trump and with this administration. He's talking to many people. Of course, his national security team, first and foremost, and you know who the members of that team are. And this is something, obviously, the president takes seriously. He's always thinking about what's in the best interest of the United States of America, of our military, of the American people.
Many arguments could be put forward as to why we should strike Iran. Okay, well, they're certainly not ruling any of that out.
I like how they don't actually make the arguments, though. They're
course,
just like, there are arguments in favor of it. Figure them out.
There is no precedent in American history except for Venezuela of this amount of buildup of U.S. military. This is more than Midnight Hammer. This is Gulf War level. Like, we are talking about hundreds of thousands of U.S. assets and all of that from across the world. You have air tankers, jets, service members, naval assets, carrier strike groups, all being built up. I mean, if you were not reading the news, you would have no idea. And you'd have to like really read the news to be able to find this out. It's stunning to me.
And that's the main reason that I wanted to cover this, is because I think it's important for people to know what is happening and what is going on. Because I think it's A, completely downplayed, if B, it's even discussed at all. Because I think that there's probably some sort of calculation going on from the government, from the military, that, look, our actions have not been particularly popular, especially when it comes to Israel and the Middle East at large. And so they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to bring mention to it. They don't want to discuss it at all. And so what they probably want to do is either create some false pretense or a false flag, or just, it just popped off and something happened, or Israel was attacked, and basically to try and frame it and not give the public any sort of amount of time to have any sort of show dissent or show of, hey, we don't want to be doing this. This is incredibly unpopular. They just kind of want to spring it on us. That's my theory on it. And so, the fact that it has not been discussed, and that, again, people just are not, like, when have you seen the news? Like, there may be some stories on it, but they're not going to talk about the scale at which this is ramping up to. And, you take a look at, okay, show me what's happening, and I can tell you exactly what's going to happen in the future here. And I think this is exactly pointing out that this amount of buildup of troops, again, these things, these assets were stationed in other places that are also very important. And so to pull them away and then move them to the Middle East, something is going to happen. And that's exactly it, is yes, like I just said, I think it's not getting covered because I think rightfully so, people would be outraged, because it's like, what are we doing in the Middle East again? This is not helping us. Like, again, some prices are starting to come down. We're still in an affordability crisis. Like, the economy is still not good. And so, yes, when you're seeing this, it's like, what are we doing? Why are we focusing on wars forever, everywhere in the Middle East, at the behest of Israel? That's what it looks like. And it's like, okay, Americans are not doing well, right? Are there still people overdosing on fentanyl on the street? Like, is there still tons of homeless people everywhere? Like, what are we doing here? This is completely insane. And when you're seeing that, then of course, like, this is just crazy. This is not America first. And so, that's why, once again, I just thought it was so important because I wanted to cover it. Because, yes, as he just said, you're not seeing the coverage of this. You're not understanding what the full scope of the actions that we are taking in the buildup of troops and what that means. And so the sooner that people start to understand that and comprehend that, the longer, I guess, runway, I'll call it, of time where you can vocally, very vocally voice your displeasure on social media accounts of the White House, of representatives, of as many people as you can, just to let them know, we don't want any part of this. We don't want yet another war in the Middle East that does absolutely nothing for all United States citizens. It's literally just going to devalue our money. It's going to cause more inflation. It's going to screw all of us over. And we just can't sustain more of this again and again and again.
Making no argument. And I think because the more the American people learn, they'd be like, wait, I thought we hit them before. You told me it was already over.
Yeah.
So why do we have to do it again?
What are we doing?
Right, but what's the whole point of this? Because of some missiles for Israel? No, I'm out. That's why they're not even trying. If you learn about this, you're like, this is insane. I'm not.
And that's exactly it. Because it's like, didn't we already hit their nuclear facilities? That's what I was saying. And then also, they can't even hit us with their ballistic missiles. So like, how does this serve us at all? This doesn't help us at all. So yes, exactly what he's saying here. That's exactly what I was saying.
Bored with this.
And
Not at all.
I think there's also a bit of a like boy who cried wolf dynamic going on in terms of the lack of attention paid by the media, but also by the American public, because Trump is constantly threatening this or that and the other country and Canada and Mexico and Venezuela and Greenland. And obviously some of these threats he makes good on in some certain way. But I think that's part of why there isn't more focused attention from the American people on this. To your point about the military assets,
Well, and the other thing too, to her point, is yes, he makes all these threats all the time, but also just the news cycle is insane. Like I was looking at, okay, what videos do I want to make this week, right? Because I do them on a weekly basis, and I'm like, I had to cut out like 5 videos because it's like, okay, we need to talk about what's going on in Iran. You kind of, I want to keep pressure on as much as possible with my little channel, but like Epstein file stuff needs to be talked about because there's just genuinely insane things that are constantly happening with that. And then it's like, okay, I get one other thing that I get to talk about. And it's like, yeah, there's like 5 other things that I would have liked to talk about, but there's not enough. Like I don't, it's just me running the channel. There's no way to do that. And so, like, not just that, you know, that Trump is just insane and saying things all the time. And yes, it is kind of a, well, this is just par for the course. This is what he's constantly been talking about. But then I think also, you know, the news cycle. And then, like I said just previously, I think it's also by design so that we don't get a chance to give our public disapproval with this military action. We don't get a chance to say, what are we doing in the Middle East? And I think that's very much by design, because out of all the things that she just listed, like, yes, okay, some of them are more insane, right? Like threatening Canada, threatening Mexico, threatening Denmark. Like, these are all kind of crazy things. But I think the one that serves us the least, like if you're being completely objective and you're saying like, what do we have to gain out of threatening Canada? Like you can make some sort of argument. Yes, it may be a stupid argument. What do we get out of threatening Denmark? Yes, it's a stupid argument, but like you can make some sort of argument. There is absolutely no argument unless you are like a Zionist person, like Israelite in America, like there's no way that the average American can make any sort of argument for why we should care about what is going on with Israel and Iran. That's just my opinion, point blank. Like, I cannot, I've racked my brain, and I can't come up with any sort of argument where it's justifiable out of all the military actions that could possibly happen, that we've threatened, that whatever. This is the least important one to America's interests, in my opinion. That's just my thought on it. So, yeah, that's the other thing, too, is that this is the most infuriating one because it's so blatantly obvious that we stand to gain nothing from it. Absolutely nothing. So, yeah, that's my biggest qualm with it, is that there's no point to us doing this. It is literally the dumbest military action that we could take.
Reading Matthew Ho, who's former military himself, and he had an interesting analysis here, because obviously one reading of the military assets is it's a threat and it's meant to coerce them in negotiations. And even, you know, one reading of all the Trump officials leaking, oh my God, 90% chance that we're going to war, et cetera. One way of reading that is that's all basically a threat and a psyop to try to coerce the Iranians in terms of the negotiations. I thought this analysis from Matthew Ho was significant in terms of kind of debunking that narrative and putting some credence to the idea like, no, this is the thing they're actually planning on going through with. He says, this is the strongest indication to me of the seriousness of the U.S. threat to Iran. The U.S. has just deployed more than 2/3 of its available E-3 command control aircraft to Europe and the Middle East. The E-3 is an incredibly important aircraft. For those unfamiliar, it's the large airplane that looks like an airliner, but with revolving radar disc on top. It's loaded with an aircrew whose job is to observe, manage, and control the airspace in its area. It is especially important for directing fighters and ground sea-based missile interceptors against Iranian missiles and drones. He goes on to talk about how, like, we don't have that many of these things, and the vast bulk of them are now in the region. And it is not the sort of aircraft or military equipment that you would send to just be like, look at how tough we are. They're these like clunky, sort of like non-impressive things. But if you're actually going to go through with the thing, they're absolutely essential. So I thought that was an interesting analysis just to dig into what exactly they're sending into the region, trying to read the tea leaves of how serious this is.
Yeah, we'll get to all the assets. I mean, the other reason why I think it's going to happen is this amount of aerial refueling. That is the precursor. I've talked about this. So I met somebody who had an intimate knowledge of the so-called OP plan, the OP plan for attacking Iran. Midnight Hammer was like day one, part one of what it was supposed to be. It was a 35-day bombing campaign, which involves cruise missiles, a massive part of the entire U.S. military stockpiles. It has all this contingency planning. It looks a lot more like this in terms of the refueling. It's all the jets for the stuff to defend Israel, because the immediate, reaction expected is not only strikes on Israel, but also strikes on the United States. Another piece of news many of you may have missed is that U.S. military bases in Syria are all unceremoniously closing. Now, you might think, oh, that's great. We've been calling for... Yeah. Why is it closing now? Why? Because it is very close to Iran, very susceptible to attack. They've had multiple sort of instances. Even the bases in Iraq, those are much more hardened than some of the bases in Syria. They're the most vulnerable ones. So they're planning. Another thing many of you may have missed. Donald Trump had a very sneaky line in Truth Social just yesterday where he was going after the British Prime Minister for this new lease on Diego Garcia, which is a Pacific base, and for refueling and for taking off. And in it, he goes, Iran, if we attack, may attack other friendly countries. So the contingency plans are everywhere for this entire thing. And this looks like the big one. Now, I'm not saying...
To his point, exactly. Just the timing of them moving. Because I personally have long been on the belief of, we need to just get our footprint. Like, yes, okay, a few bases over there. But to have tons of bases in every single country over there. Like, think about the amount of military personnel that we're paying to be there. Think about all of the equipment that's required at all of those facilities. Think about, like, the amount of money that the U.S. government and military spends to have that sort of a footprint. Yes, they need to, I think, once again, let them all Highlander each other and we pull all of our assets out. Like, we shouldn't be over there. This is not our problem. And so, yes, once again, seeing them pulling it out, under any other circumstances, this would be a great thing, and I would be cheering it. But as soon as whatever happens in Iran happens, they're just going to move those all right back in. And to the point that Sagar is exactly making, the only reason why they're taking it out now is because those are the most vulnerable bases. And if they can't hit us, and this is exactly what I was saying, with the missiles that they're trying to say, Iran, you're not allowed to have, they can hit us in the Middle East, and they're not able to hit us here. And that exactly proves it, right? Us removing and shuttering, I'm going to say temporarily, probably, shuttering those bases and then moving them in Syria and moving them out right now, is that, yes, in that case, that's where if they want to strike back against us, that's the only way for them to hit us. And of course, if Americans are dying over there, that is unpopular, and so that will, ratchet up the general populations distaste for what is going on over there if we are losing people. So again, all the incentives are, yes, we're going to shutter these bases and we're going to move them out because A, loss of American life would just make us even more angry, and then B, that's where they're going to hit us, right? That's the only place where they can strike back at us. And so by shutting those bases down, then that removes the threat of basically putting American lives at risk. So yes, again, it's show me the signs, right? I'm putting a bunch of points on a graph, and I'm telling you that, yeah, it seems like it's essentially imminent. And the claims that there's a 90% chance that we go to war with Iran, I mean, that seems very credible, right? And especially with, hey, when the agreement that we're trying to come to would basically completely defang Iran and leave them defenseless completely. And so, yeah, that's going to be a complete non-starter. So something is going to have to happen, because then Israel's going to just throw themselves into the fray if we don't obtain all of the demands that they have, because they know that we're just going to have to go in and back them up. So, yeah, it's just, you think about what is the logical end to all of the things that are building up, and that's why I say, yes, I am fully in belief that there is going to be some sort of war with Iran.
That we're going to see hundreds of thousands of troops on the ground. I don't think that that's what this administration will ever do, because they've learned the lesson of Iraq. This is going to be Libya style, is you decapitate, you destroy, and you basically just declare victory immediately. And then when civil war erupts 6 months later, who could have seen any of that coming, right? Let the Israelis continue to do the dirty work of all of that. And so, let's turn now to the vice president, who was on Fox News talking about the negotiations, saying, well, in some ways they went well, in some ways they didn't. Let's take a listen.
We would very much like, as the president has said, to resolve this through a conversation and a diplomatic negotiation. But the president has all options on the table. And, one thing about the negotiation I will say this morning is, in some ways it went well. They agreed to meet afterwards. But in other ways, it was very clear that the president has set some red lines that the Iranians are not yet willing to actually acknowledge and work through. So we're going to keep on working it. But of course, the president reserves the ability to say when he thinks that diplomacy has reached its natural end. We hope we don't get to that point, but if we do, that'll be the president's call.
President, red lines. Look, this is all nonsense. The red lines are Israeli red lines. There's nobody cared about ballistic missiles until December, when Prime Minister Netanyahu came here. This entire thing is a manufactured crisis, a war of choice on behalf of the United States. Iran is not closer to a nuclear bomb. They're not even.
And the other thing to keep in mind, too, is that Bibi Netanyahu has all the incentive in the world to continue with this, any sort of incursion, just constant war, because before Gaza, October 7th happened, he was supposed to go on trial, and he was incredibly unpopular. And the entire reason why he has not went to trial in Israel yet is because it's been constant war. And so I can't possibly go stand trial right now because we're in war with Gaza. I can't, or Palestine or whatever. I can't possibly go stand trial now because now we're in an incursion with Iran. And so it's just one thing after another, and his entire incentive is to never end. It's basically never ending war. And then that aligns with the military-industrial complex, where they want continuing wars forever. And so when you have both of those forces, I mean, of course, that's what you're going to get. And so, yeah, you just have to look at what are the incentives to continue on with these, frankly, insane actions. And so, of course, that's what we're going to continue doing.
Claiming it right now.
Yeah.
If they were, they would say it, just like they did previously. They would release the intelligence. I mean, does anyone else feel dramatically insulted? At least last time around, we had the yellow cake, the uranium, and Colin Powell and his president. This time around, there's nothing. I mean, this is more bullshit than Iraq, which I never thought I would live to see. I truly did not think I would ever live to see this.
Yeah.
But here we are.
They're not even bothering to manufacture a real case. So if I had to guess what is going on here and what has gone on here is effectively Trump wanted to do some little sort of choreographed exchange similar to the 12 Days War with Iran previously. And so there was a level of assets in the region that would be commensurate with that sort of approach. And then the Iranians were like, no, we can't just keep letting you attack us and just do symbolic responses. We're serious this time. We're not messing around. And so that pushed the timeline back, because then you have to usher more assets into the region. And as long as you are allowing allowing Israel to sort of like pull your chain and move the red lines, and now Trump has backed himself into this corner, it's hard to see how they get out of it. And I think the reason why they have so much that they've moved into the region is because they want to not only decapitate the regime, they want to degrade their capabilities sufficiently that they can't really adequately respond.
Yeah.
And so that's why they're going for this potential approach of like overwhelming force. And maybe that will be successful, and maybe it won't. Anytime you're talking about kinetic action, you are taking incredible risk. You are courting an unbelievable amount of chaos. And Iran does have cards that they can play. They were doing some military exercises in the Strait of Hormuz to remind you, like, listen, this is a very important part of the world. We have our own choke points that could be very painful for your population, and yes, we will suffer probably more than you, but we can make your people suffer too. And they don't want this war. They are not behind you. So there's going to be zero appetite from the American people to suffer on behalf of this war of choice against Iran.
Exactly. See, the difference, our public is not engaged.
Yeah, and exactly what she said on the onset there, which was, yes, okay, the last time this happened, it was, okay, we're going to do some targeted strikes, there's going to be some damage, and then you can retaliate, right? You strike back at Israel, but then we intercept all the, the missiles and all the things that are happening there, right? With the Iron Dome. And, don't be fooled, the U.S., it wasn't actually the Iron Dome, it was the U.S. operating the Iron Dome, which protected most of Israel. But even then, they still got hit. And so if there was any sort of attack, again, with the amount of military that they have, the military force that they have, with an incoming strike, I think there's probably no way that we could simultaneously shut down all of that, right? There's some amount of missiles that would be able to be launched off by Iran to try and destroy Israel. And yeah, you can't just, if you're Iran, you have to have some amount of respect for yourself and the leadership, because otherwise you look weak, right? And then I think there would be some factions within Iran, like in the leadership or oppositional groups or parties, that would have a high level of scrutiny placed on the current leadership if they allow the United States to continue bombing them without any sort of serious strike back at Israel or the United States bases in the area or whatever. So they can't be seen to just allow the United States to do this over and over again without any sort of repercussions, like an all-out scale strike on Israel. And even in Israel, there was, I think the United States downplayed it a lot, but a lot of the there were things that happened that destroyed large parts of Israel. And so when you are seeing that, yeah, you can't let the United States off the hook and allow them to strike you and degrade you and do this over and over, and then just have some sort of showy, okay, yeah, we launched some missiles, but then we basically allowed you to shoot them all down. And the other thing about that is, with that, you see how the reaction went, right? How the United States and Israel used the Iron Dome, and you got to see, okay, what were the weaknesses? Where were the strikes that actually hit? So then they had to have taken, I'm sure, something away from that as well. So these newest round of strikes would be even more efficient from Iran. And that's what makes this even more concerning. So, I mean, who knows what'll happen, but I think it will be very interesting to see. But I think something does, again, I think it is a very high probability that some sort of action is taken. And I think the United States and Israel are probably more confident than they should be. Because once again, I think it gave Iran the ability to probe and see, okay, where can we actually make efficient strikes? How can we actually stress out the Iron Dome and break through? And then, again, I think it was a restrained attack, and it'll only be stronger this next time when it's not just a for show attack like I think it was during that, us bombing their nuclear facilities and then them striking back.
This is the biggest story in Iran. This is all anybody in Iran is paying attention to. And as we all found out, during the protests, it's not like people love the regime, but if you're going to be attacked by an outside power, guess what? That's the dream of the party in power. For somebody like them who's actually quite weak after a protest like this, sure, they remain in power. No, now there's a rally around the flag. I mean, the best hope from the United States, this is what I think is going to happen. And this is where also, if you're anti-war, we should call it
And exactly as you said, you can see it, right? Where it was like, oh yeah, Canada was going to get a far right prime minister, and then Trump came in with the support, and then no, they got an extreme leftist. And the same thing happened in a bunch of countries in South America. And so, yes, that is the thing about this, is that, yeah, they rally around when you have such a polarizing figure or an invading country or whatever. It's going to solidify any sort of opposition to that force or that power that is seen to be coming in as an outsider and expressing any sort of support or attacking who isn't currently in power or whatever. And so when you are, again, that's the thing about it, is by doing these sorts of things, we're only helping and further entrenching the people who are in power there, right, in Iran. So, yeah, that's just, again, something to keep in mind, and is a good point that Sagar brings up here.
We see it. What they want is for us to say tens of thousands of Americans will die. That's probably not going to happen. What's probably going to happen is a massive air campaign, very similar to what happened with Libya, a no-fly zone, a destruction of IRGC facilities and nuclear research, maybe a killing of the Ayatollah. It'll be like a couple of weeks. Then they'll say, mission accomplished. Whoever comes in next, you negotiate on our terms. That's it, period. But we will never occupy. That way, they can make fun of us who are anti-war, be like, see, you said it would be a forever war, kind of like with Venezuela.
Yeah.
They were not actually going to care if it's a democracy or whatever. Israel cares whether Iran is a democracy? No, okay, they prefer a monarchy. Yeah, maybe they'll fly Reza Pahlavi or something like that back into the country. But my point is, the way that this is going to go, they're going to use the tip of the spear of the U.S. military. We saw it in Venezuela. Special operations, the only, the part of our military which is the best of the best of the best. Mm-hmm. Same with our aerial. There's nobody who even comes close to American air superiority. But the point is, and this is what I want everyone to remember, strategic endgame. Libya looked like a dramatic success. It was very popular, actually, at the time, until it became a disaster. Syria, same thing. Supporting the rebels, the red line, chemical weapons. How could you be against that? 14 years later, there's a massive civil war, 500,000 people, all of that are dead, dramatically unpopular, the refugee crisis. That's what's going to happen. And then the Israeli part of this is very important too. They're going to try and tell you, this is about going after the Iranians are bad. What the Israelis want is to turn Iran into Syria, into a rump state which is beleaguered by civil war, where they can go and assassinate IRGC people. They want it to splinter. They don't want any more regional power. They want to see it collapse into a full-blown civil war that eventually, if it comes out better on the other side, like with Syria, who cares? Al-Qaeda, whatever. As long as he's pro-Israel, doesn't matter to me, right? So this is not about the Iranian people. They will have immense amount of suffering. And so for those of us who are against this, we have to calibrate our expectations. They want us to freak out to say that hundreds of troops are going to die. I really don't think that's going to happen. There will be pain, almost certainly. We shouldn't underestimate our own military capabilities when you throw it all out, as we all saw against Saddam, right? Against Saddam, shock and awe. Yeah, it works. It actually works pretty well. We can never do the next part. And you can.
Yeah, and I think the reason why, it's the same, going all the way back, this has been the case, I think, all the way back to when guerrilla warfare was essentially, I'll call it rolled out, right? Because it was, there was, way back, it was way more guerrilla, and then it turned into very formal, right? If you study any sort of history of war, it was very formal, where armies would march out, they would meet each other, they would clash, and then, it happened all the way to revolutionary times. And then basically with the United States, when we broke away from British rule, that reverted back to guerrilla warfare, and that was a large part of how we were able to win, right? And I think ever since then, the larger invading forces that have went in, I mean, just look at Venezuela, look at Iraq, look at, again, all these military conflicts that were just mentioned literally right there, right? What happens is it's impossible to completely weed out all of your opposition, because they can just go run and hide, and then they can do little 1Z, 2Z strikes, and it's almost impossible to completely weed out an entire oppositional force. And so, yes, exactly what he's saying. Yes, I think it will be airstrikes and, a huge show of force, but then I hope that we have learned our lesson, that we just need to pull back and then leave them alone. And if Israel really wants to go in and show some sort of power or control or whatever, which I don't think they even have the population to do, right? I don't think they have the resources to do it. I guess let them take a crack at it, but really all they want is instability. And so that is why I think, yes, exactly as he's saying, it's not because we're particularly bad at it, but I think the reality is it's just a completely disconnected disillusionment that you think that you could actually go in and do an on-the-ground assault and take over this entire region and get people to submit. Because what happened in Afghanistan, the exact same thing. Okay, there's all these forces that are in hiding in the mountains, and there's no way that you can weed them out, and they're walking among the population. And then as soon as we pull out, yes, okay, there was a top-down military force that kept them suppressed, but then they just basically rose up, took over everything, and then they're in power now. So yeah, boots on the ground and taking over a region doesn't actually work. Like, you can't actually suppress the populations that live in this area and effectively rule over them. That's not what happens. The best thing you can hope for is a suppression of their military action against you, and then as soon as you leave, there's a power vacuum, and those forces that you were trying to suppress rise up and actually take power. And that is exactly what has happened in Vietnam, in like all these places that we have went in and done this in the past. Like, it's just not a reality that is going to actually happen. So yeah, a very top level, high level airstrike and degradation of operational abilities, and then chaos is really the best thing that we can hope to effectuate here. And hopefully the military has learned that's about all that we can actually efficiently do.
Not have faith in these people, because this time around they won't try to go for democracy. They're just going to say, well, as long as they don't pursue nukes. But inside that bubbling cauldron is a nightmare, as we've seen every single time.
One more point on that, which ties in with the Epstein files coverage that we've done and what we've learned from the emails Jeffrey Epstein sending to any number of people, is that the Epstein class views war as a positive, like as an overt positive. They see the chaos, the death, destruction as this is how we consolidate more wealth and power. So you have a whole class of people who are cheering for war with Iran because they want exactly the warning that Sagar is issuing about like this, failed rump state, civil war, refugee crisis, chaos, economic collapse, all of those sorts of things. There is a very powerful class around the world that looks at that and goes, great, that's my moment to shine. That's where I can gather up even more. That's where I can feast on the carcass of this country and benefit directly from that chaos. And so as you're looking at, this very likely war and all of the other.
And this is where it'll be so interesting to see what actually happens with this. But I've seen claims of Trump is being threatened by Israel, that if he doesn't do this, they will release all the stuff they have on him that has been suppressed in the Epstein files. I have seen if he goes ahead and does it, there are hackers in Israel or Iran that are threatening to release all the points where Trump is implicated in the Epstein files that have been suppressed. I have seen, there's all these stories of, okay, there's pressure on Trump from both sides. Hey, do it. Hey, don't do it. That's a very thin tightrope to walk, because I do think that there are things that we have not seen, because it was claimed, there was a claim that maybe only 2% of all of the Epstein files have actually been released. So like, if you believe that, that's a mind-blowing, like frankly insane amount of additional content that could be out there. And if people have their hands on it, whether it's the Mossad, whether it's hackers, whether it's whatever it is, and Trump is being threatened with that, well then, it's a weird, that's why I say it's a weird situation that I don't know what is actually going to happen with it, because I think there are a lot of pressures out there. But then back to the point that she is saying, again, what was the direct quote? 0% interest rates were too expensive. So like, okay, yes, exactly. You go in, you create war, you create turmoil, and you cause this sort of a thing to happen where, you can swoop in and get a bunch of assets on the cheap because of all the instability that you have sown. So yes, exactly. That is the point. And then what are all the interests of Israel to begin with in the first place? And if they have something that they can hang over Trump's head, well then yes, of course that's going to get him to do some sort of action. And it's just, okay, how much action can they actually force him to do?
Ones that we just can't stop, we continually don't blunder into, intentionally get ourselves into around the world. That is a lot of the logic of why we continually go in this direction.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's go to A4 then.
And as well, in the interests of the military-industrial complex. They would absolutely love if it was boots on the ground there indefinitely. So, like, do not discount that interest group as well. And I'm sure there's tons of pressure coming from there.
To show everybody the plan. And so if Barak Ravid is writing it, it's all there. Trump moves closer to a major war with Iran. The Trump administration is closer to a major war in the Middle East than Americans realize. U.S. military operation would be a, quote, massive, weeks-long campaign that would look more like full-fledged war than last month's pinpoint operation in Venezuela. The sources noted it would likely be a joint U.S.-Israeli campaign that is much broader in scope and existential for the regime than the 12-day war previously. Such a war would have dramatic influence on the entire region. Trump came close to striking Iran in early January. When the window of opportunity passed, the administration shifted to a two-track approach, nuclear talks paired with a massive military buildup. By delaying and bringing in so much force, Trump has raised expectations for what an operation will look like if a deal cannot be reached. Right now, a deal does not look likely. And again, the reason why is because the Iranians are willing to negotiate all day long on nuclear enrichment. But what they're saying is we have to have some sovereign capability to, have a civilian nuclear power. Look, maybe they're lying.
And here's the other thing too about that I just kind of popped into my head about just all the countries where we have basically went in and sown a bunch of chaos and effectively chopped off the heads of all the regimes, and now they're all, none of them really are all that organized. That's why we are doing it, is because if you think about, okay, we went in, we strike one, and then all the other countries don't do anything. Because I think if you could go back in time and you could they could put aside all their differences and they could see, hindsight's 20/20, right? If they could see into the future and see that, oh no, they're going to come for us next. Oh no, they're going to come for us next. Oh no, they're going to come for us. Like all these countries that we have basically toppled all the regimes at, if they would have known what was in the future, because I think a lot of it was, okay, they're just going after them. So then all the rest of the other countries just kind of sit aside, well, we don't want to gain the ire of the United States, so we're just going to leave them, our neighbor, of course, they're degrading them, and they all hate each other too. So that's a big component of it. But I think if they were to know that, oh no, it's going to come for us, then this country, then this country, then like the 7 countries, right? if they all knew, then the first time this happened, they all would have just band together and just destroyed Israel. And so instead, what has happened is no, they just said, well, we don't want to mess with the U.S. We don't want to piss them off. So we're just going to allow them to do what they do. And then hopefully we don't ever have to think about this going into the future. Obviously, that's not how it's played out, but that was probably their thinking at the time. But I think if they could have looked back and said, oh no, they're coming for, I didn't speak up when they came for X country, and now, they moved on to us, right? Of course. And so, yeah, I think this is finally, Iran is the last one that's really capable of putting their foot down and doing any sort of actual attack that would harm Israel, because everyone else is just in chaos. And so this is kind of the last straw for that. And so that is why we're looking to kind of decapitate, and hopefully chaos happens before. But if, again, the first time that this playbook was done, if they all would have banded together, they could have cut off the head of the other snake, which is the Israel going out and being the aggressor and directing the United States military against all these other countries. And that's just my theory and my hypothesis and what I think would have been better for them. But again, they all hate each other. So they're probably not particularly upset that these other countries are getting toppled. But then if they would have seen the writing on the wall and they would have understood that, oh no, we're doing this to every country in the region, maybe they would have banded together and actually put their differences aside for the greater good of every other country aside from Israel in the region.
We're not going to take their entire word for it. The whole point for them is there's saving face, there's legitimacy, there's sovereignty that's all involved. But the real red line for them is the ballistic missiles. Yeah. They're like, we will not allow Israel to attack us at will. We cannot do that. Which, again, you can understand that for any state that exists. Yet effectively, what their strategic logic is, well, we might as well punish them and show them that we can do something and hope they're... See, this is the real tragedy of it. We have set up the circumstance where these people, what do they tell us all the time? They are not afraid to die. I actually believe that now at this time. I think that the IRGC and the Ayatollah and all those other people, they know 90% of them will be killed. I think they know that. But they're like, at the end of the day, the logic for preserving our regime, which, again, they believe in the logic and all that of the Islamic Republic, is that some of us will make it out of here. And the hope is that the 10% who make it, they'll survive. And this is about our sovereignty. And they know that they're going to be killed. Like they are very aware of their military, capabilities. They're not going to be able to do very much. They can do some damage, and I certainly think that they will, but it's not going to be even close. All they can hope for is an insurgent Houthi-like strategy, spread the weapons around, and just be a pain in the ass for a very, very long period of time, and hope that you and I, if we have to go to the gas pump, are like, hey, why am I paying $5.50 a gallon, right? Which, again, the Houthis were very capable of doing, and were not nearly as capable as the IRGC. Same with an insurgency, as we saw in Iraq. They want to make it as miserable as possible. That's a long and a very dangerous thing for the civilian population. So this is bad because they know that who knows how many civilians would be killed in an Israeli-U.S. operation against Iran. It's a nightmare for the Iranian people. Yeah. Then it's a nightmare, too, because the government is basically like, yep, they're all going to die, and so are we. It's self-suicide. And then the real nightmare on our part is our population is asleep, watching the NBA or something like that. And when are they going to wake up? Only when the bombs start falling on Tehran. They have no idea that anything's going on right now.
Yeah. And
exactly. And the other thing that I'll point out, too, and this is why I think they're not afraid, is because, it's the reality of the situation, right? So trying to shove your head in the sand and, oh no, we'll make it out all right. The writing is on the wall. They're not going to disillusion themselves into thinking that they're going to make it out of this alive. And so if that is the reality that you are staring down, and just that's what's going to happen, right? If that is what you're staring directly in the face, what do? If I was in their shoes, I would just put up both middle fingers and just launch as many missiles as possible at Israel and just try and destroy them. And because this is all you're doing. You're the one putting the poison pills in the negotiations. You're the ones that are bad faith negotiating. And so I'm placing the blame on you. This is happening because of you. And so if I'm going down, I'm going to take you with me. Just point blank. That's exactly what's happening. And it is exactly, that's why you have nukes, is mutually assured destruction. It's, if you're going to attack me with a nuke, I'm going to make darn sure that I completely destroy your entire country. I leave it completely flattened, and we're all going down together. It's a sinking ship, and we're all going down, and I'm taking you with me. You can be guaranteed, if that is happening to me, I'm causing maximal damage back in the other direction. And it's not just the people who are attacking me, because again, the United States is the most advanced and, you know, the largest military. And so, yeah, I'm not going to be disillusioned that I can strike them back. And yes, okay, there might be some casualties that I'm going to cause, but the maximalist amount that I could inflict damage onto would be bombing Israel with everything that I have left in my arsenal. And that's exactly what I would do if I were in their shoes.
I mean, from the Iranians' perspective, they're like, these Americans, and by the way, they're like Gulf Arab allies, are coddled, you know, in the UAE and wherever. They're like outnumbered. Their population is outnumbered by their indentured workforce. They're, you know, here in the US, they're not bought in on this idea. They're not ready to pay any sort of price. And so we can exact some pain. Now, I mean, maybe they can, maybe they can't, depending on how effective that first wave of strikes are. But, you know, this is the logic that we've created. Multiple times, we've now had the Iranians agree to effectively these choreographed responses where it's like, okay, we think this right tactical approach is we'll do a limited response that doesn't result in any U.S. soldier deaths or significant damage, and then that will persuade them to leave us alone. And clearly, that approach hasn't worked. So now they're, okay, well, I guess we have to take a different approach. The idea that they would give up their ballistic missile, I mean, that is insane. No country would agree to that. Then you can't project force at all in your region. I mean, you're just a sitting duck then for Israel and, you know, whatever then their proxies and whatever they want to do to you, and for us as well. There is no way, and that is intentionally put in to these negotiations, inserted into these negotiations by Netanyahu and agreed to by our idiot president as an intentional poison pill. Let's go ahead and play and take a listen to, this is a professor at the University of Tehran.
Yeah, because you know what actually happens when that occurs, right? If they were to actually agree to it. Palestinians, just look at Gaza, where Israel's just constantly bombing them, attacking them, and they, you know, basically genocide. That's what happens. If Iran were to agree to that, you have absolutely no way to strike back at Israel, and then it literally just becomes genocide. Like, that's just the logical conclusion to, oh yeah, we're going to give up any sort of ballistic missiles. So, of course, that's a non-starter. You cannot look at what they have done the past years in Gaza and go, oh yeah, I feel good about leaving the fate of our people and the fate of our country in Israeli hands, which is essentially exactly what that would be. And or the U.S. having any sort of faith that the U.S. has any ability to rein in Israel's insane actions. We obviously have no will for it whatsoever, which is just, again, completely mind-boggling, and it blows my mind, but that's just the state of things. And so, yes, when you are looking at it, there's no way that they would agree to that, because you just look at, again, it's so, we're not even that far removed from Israel bombing Gaza over and over and over again and just destroying their civilian population. So, yeah, again, that's a complete non-starter. There's no way they could ever go along with that.
Who, you know, speaks to Western media quite a lot, or I guess like, you know, Western but non-establishment media quite a bit.
He speaks English. He's basically a regime translator for the rest of us, which
Yes.
is fine. We want to show people what they're thinking of.
Well, and in fairness to him, I mean, you live in Iran, you're a university professor, like your ability to completely speak freely is going to be curtailed. But in any case, I wanted to play a bit of how he is explaining the view from inside Iran and how they're thinking about, you know, as we proceed on this march to war, how they're thinking about what they have, what this is about, and what chips they have to play as well. Let's take a listen to that.
This is not a normal part of the world. This is not an ordinary region. It is full of oil and gas installations, oil and gas wells. It is full of refineries. It is full of ports for exporting oil and gas, importing goods from the West through all the wealth that is accumulated and from different parts of the world. And then you have ships, tankers coming and going. Then you have the Strait of Hormuz. The Persian Gulf itself is not very wide. Iran controls one side of it and islands in the middle of it. And then there's the Indian Ocean. There is, with the missile capabilities and drone capabilities that Iran has, whether they're from the sea or the land, the global economy will be devastated. And the price of energy will go through the roof. Trump being weak and vulnerable as things are, unpopular, people opposing war in the United States. You now have a very difficult economic situation. It's getting worse in the United States. And then to add on all that is, of course, the exposure of the Epstein class to the American people and the cover-up and the continued cover-up. So he's not going to have popular support when he engages in war, and when the pain starts kicking in. Americans are not going to like that. His own 30% or so supporters are going to be the first to be outraged when they lose their jobs.
I thought it was interesting, and he mentioned several times during this interview, the Epstein class.
Before that, exactly what I was saying, though, is that, yeah, this is the least justifiable military action anywhere in the world. Like, what do we actually stand to gain from this? And so that is why I think, yes, exactly to what he's saying. That's why you're not seeing this in the news, why it's not being reported, this amount of buildup, because they want it to just be sprung and just, oh, it just happened. We had no idea that we were going to go in this direction. Because if everyone knew, everyone would be outraged and they would say, no, absolutely not. This is not acceptable. We have nothing to gain from this. What are we even doing? And so, yeah, exactly to his point, I think, again, it's a point very well made, and that's why I had said it earlier. But it's just someone who actually knows what he's talking about and backs up exactly what I was saying.
Yeah.
And tying that in and saying this war and the whole march to war, this is the doing of the Epstein class, and talking about the vulnerability of Trump, who is both in the files and also, responsible for this mass cover-up that has created this backlash in the population.
What do you learn from that? They're not stupid. And that's one of the things I really hate often about the way that we paint our adversaries.
Yeah.
It's just, even with the Al-Qaeda, with the they're like, oh, they're just, goat herders in caves. I'm like, yeah, the gunmen maybe. I'm like, the people at the top are definitely not like that. Same thing with here. I mean, what do you hear all the time? It's a great civilization. They invented math and all of the, right? They have this great air of learning, and yeah, that's the point. Like, we're not up against a bunch of rubes. Like, these people have survived for decades despite being punished by the West, including with sanctions.
They have defied us for,
right.
Like you said, decades.
Yes.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is, of course, the people at the top, you don't get to that level. You don't accidentally fall ass backwards into being in charge of a country. You probably have to be pretty darn smart, and then you also have to be pretty darn ruthless. And that is why I say that marriage of those two traits, that's why I say, yeah, if I'm going down, if I'm putting myself in their shoes, I'm taking you with me. I'm degrading you. If I'm going to be dead, I am launching every single missile, every single ordinance, all of my drones to cause maximal damage, mostly against Israel, but also against the United States and all the stuff that they have built up, right? Whatever the most vulnerable tools are or assets are that we have in the region. So yes, I'm going to try and that will be the greatest test, is with all of our advanced aircrafts and all this stuff, will drones be able to just take us out as easily as the Ukrainian drones took out all of the advanced Russian aircrafts. And this will be a very important proving ground of how much easier is it for them to degrade, and at what price point to degrade multi-million dollar aircrafts or multi-million dollar ships or whatever it is that we're using, right? How much less expensive is it for them with what they're using, which is like drones, cheaper missiles, like all these sorts of things where they're not having to spend as much, but we're having to spend way more to fend off their attacks, or, you know, what we're using, they use lower costs like drones to destroy airplanes. It'll be very interesting to see if this actually happens, comes to fruition, and starts going full scale, what will actually happen and how that actually plays out. And if we get exposed that, well, all these super expensive weapons that we have been stockpiling are just completely worthless in the new era of warfare. And that I'm very interested and curious to see how that plays out.
An astonishing accomplishment.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, this isn't the first time an American regime has wanted to take them out.
Right,
and they've
exactly.
survived. And, you know, and I can't say thrive, but they've survived nonetheless.
That's all they care about is survival. I mean, North Korea is a similar example. Like if you're willing to bear pain, you can live as long as you sprint to a bomb. Well, what we see inside of their logic is also they're obviously paying deep attention to us. And in an asymmetric conflict, Vietnam, I mean, you know, a lot of people forget this. People said the same thing. Ho Chi Minh, he's just a communist guy. No, like they were very intelligent. They deeply exploited the cleavage in American society over the Vietnam War. And they intentionally fed into that. They would invite Jane Fonda over, right? And they had all these press conferences, and they would make it very clear with their propaganda, like, all of this can end. This is not about you. You're being taken advantage of. You're being drafted and sent to die. Like, they speak fluent English. They knew exactly how to play into the problems for LBJ. I mean, the whole Tet Offensive thing. Remember, they literally killed LBJ wanting to run for re-election. Like, they know exactly what they're doing. You should remember then that the Iranians have a very similar capacity. I am a bit skeptical, and actually this will be a great testing ground for many of my theories of the US military. I have long believed we're like a Rolls-Royce engine, which is really, really cool, but requires an insane amount of mechanics and uptake and costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what I've always feared is that it could be taken out by these $10,000 drones in mass capacity with the Chinese and the Russians, as the Ukrainians, frankly, have been able to stand up even to their limited capacity against the Russians. Like, all you need is drones running off to be able to defeat like much more expensive technology.
Yeah.
This will be a genuine test case if it does happen. Can they actually shut down the Straits of Hormuz? What are their capabilities? They could actually be a paper tiger. I'm not ruling that out, considering what happened with the 12-day war. So on the one hand, they had ballistic missiles that were capable of hitting Israel. On the other hand, there was a disaster for them. Like, a lot of them were killed and infiltrated by the Mossad. It's very possible. I wouldn't put it past the U.S. military to wipe out all of their ballistic missile, defenses. I mean, God, our military has not been used in this way. I mean, since 2003, like, God only knows, AI, Palantir, and all of this, like, we could probably wipe it out. We could actually maybe destroy all their conventional capabilities. But again, that doesn't mean that we're going to win the strategic battle. So that's a long.
Yeah, and that's basically what I'm saying, in that instead of them sitting back and waiting, the second that they would see some sort of aggressive action from the United States or Israel, then they're going to launch everything at Israel that they have. Like, everything possible is going to basically be launched at them, and I think there's no way the Iron Dome is able to stop all of that. And that's exactly why I'm kind of curious, I mean, morbid curiosity, but kind of curious to see exactly what happens, is because I don't know how it would play out, and I think they know, right? If you're going to see, the full U.S. military force flexed on you, well, then I'm going to go down. So, of course, I'm going to try and cause maximal pain. So, of course, I'm going to launch my entire arsenal. Like, anything that's not going to be used for immediate defense, all of that is going at Israel, pretty much. Like, that's what's happening. So, Yeah, just very interesting to see how, exactly what he's saying, exactly how it plays out, because there's so many variables, and yeah, it's just a different thing than I think we have seen in quite some time. And again, the evolution of cheap technologies that I think directly counter what has been seen as the most prolific, the strongest, the just on a cost basis, right? It makes it much easier for a military that cannot afford all of these top equipment. They can't afford that, but they can counter it at a significantly lower cost.
Long way, kind of setting this up, but let's put the maps and all of that on the screen just so you guys can see all of these assets that are moving into the region from all of these refueling tankers.
And this is just a fact. Point blank, it's well known. It is much more costly to be the aggressor than it is the defender. And this is for any sort of military action, right? Because the amount that you need to invest versus, oh yeah, we're entrenched, we're dug in, we can just run defense, all these sorts of things. It is much easier for Iran to do this than, even if you just look at any of these carriers, right? Any of these aircraft carriers, like the amount of money it costs us just to run one of them in the region is gigantic. Like, it is so expensive. So yeah, that's the thing, is they definitely have a strategic advantage, if you will. And in the new era of military weaponry, again, I just think it could be very interesting how it all plays out.
Different military assets, and you talked about the command and control planes and the U.S. Navy. Let's go to that one, the next one, please. Third of the U.S. Navy is now operating in and around the Persian Gulf. 2 aircraft carriers, air support, comparisons with 1991, and raises the question, as they say, that nobody wants to talk about. And then 8-8, let's put this one up here. This kind of highlights what I was saying earlier. Iran is getting ready for war with the United States. It's confronting its biggest threat in decades. The regime is trying to boost its odds of survival if the diplomatic odds fall through. Tehran is deploying its forces, dispersing decision-making authority, fortifying its nuclear sites, expanding its crackdowns. The move reflects its leaders' belief that survival of the regime itself is at stake. It's like I said, they know that they're all most of them are probably going to die. So what you do is you create a cell structure, you move it around, you try and create survivability inside of your command and control networks. They have been hardening some of their things, and they're probably focusing on like a Pareto principle of like the highest impact with the lowest amount of force. You try and mine the Straits of Hormuz, right? And make it so that it's instantaneous, like a button push. Their ballistic missile capability probably will get wiped out very quickly. So then you need like various different nodes and things that they may not be able to hit in a first strike. Again, I'm not going to underestimate the capacity of the U.S. military, but it only takes 1, 2, 3 for it to change the entire strategic logic of the situation.
On the one hand, you've got the Venezuela example where, Venezuela had supposedly significant capabilities that were just wiped out, right? And there was, not a single U.S. service member is killed in this, extraordinary action, et cetera. On the other hand, you have the example of the Houthis, where it's this ragtag group, some like cheap, some of it off-the-shelf technology, and we're effectively defeated by that. We're like, okay, we're just not really, up for expending what would be required to deal with this situation. So we're moving it along. So you have both examples, in recent memory. And to the point of Iranian preparation, keep in mind that we learned something from the 12 Days War. The Israelis learned something from the 12 Days War, including the fact that they do have some vulnerability to Iran being able to hit them and penetrate their air defenses. The Iranians also learned from the 12 Days War about what they're able to accomplish, where those weaknesses and vulnerabilities are, in terms of Israeli air defenses in particular. So, and they learned about, okay, who are the infiltrators? How were we compromised in this way? They also learned from the protests. Because one of the things that happened during the protests is we helped to funnel a bunch of Starlink satellites into Iran, so that, and we're, out there, Mike Pompeo and others bragging about, to the Mossad agents who are marching alongside the protesters, congratulations. So in any case, the protests were a fantastic opportunity for the Iranians to smoke out, okay, who are our ops And with the Starlink thing, one of the theories is because they were eventually able to take the Starlink capacity down as well. Wow. So were they able to track, which, that was an extraordinary development, were they able to track who were the owners of those terminals, who was using that tech? Because that, again, would have given them a blueprint and a roadmap to who are our ops and how do we take them out. And some of those would have been, very likely, foreign intel that could have, been causing problems and providing intelligence to the Israelis, most likely, and to the U.S., obviously, those two being very connected. So they have also learned and have some ideas of where their vulnerabilities are, where their strengths are, and the way that they need to approach this as well. And so that's important to keep in mind as too, that they have not remained static. To the point about the, the sort of propaganda push, this was interesting. Put A10 up on the screen here. You have the Ayatollah, again, getting in on the kind of Epstein class discussion. And he tweeted out, "This island of corruption," referring, of course, to Jeffrey Epstein's rape island, is only one example. There is much more of this. Just as this was not apparent and then became exposed, there are many other things that will soon come to light. So a direct threat there that hey, we've got some stuff. And, the Iranians have successfully hacked Epstein's emails, and there have been, successful Iranian hacks. And Ryan points out here, according to the search warrant used to search John Bolton's home, Iran hacked Bolton's AOL account 3 times. That cache has not yet been released. Khamenei is hinting at leaks to come as several U.S. armadas float nearby with countless missiles aimed at his head. So maybe this is just
And that's another example of exactly what I was saying. And although mine, the example that I used where, okay, they may have hacked the Epstein files, and so they have a bunch of unredacted and unreleased files. That one might be slightly less substantiated, right? It's kind of just hearsay, and it might not be entirely true. In this instance, this is a more directly, yes, this is actually, there's proof. John Bolton was actually hacked 3 times on his AOL account. And so, yes, what do they have? And exactly, it could actually be calling out, saying that what I said was right, because he's referencing island of corruption. So, yes, it's hard to know exactly what they have, but it is naive to think that they don't have anything, and that if we took some sort of escalatory and actual all-out attack against them, that they would not release all of this as an attempt to sow chaos and discontent and malcontent here in the United States in hopes that it causes our leadership to draw back because of how unpopular the military actions would be in the first place, but then how, hey, you're going to have to answer to the citizens of the United States because look at all this new stuff that has come out, and this is just completely unacceptable. So, yeah, again, a lot of things to keep in mind that I think are very interesting, and I'm curious to see, once again, how it all plays out.
Threat. But, there's reason to believe that he could have some goods here. He could have some sort of compromise that is, plausibly could be released.
This is what you do, is you have to do your best to try, you leak stuff, you make it difficult, you do the mining. I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, I don't underestimate the U.S. military. On the other, I look at the Houthis, I look at all, we've had a significant amount of planning. I do know about all of the different problems in logistics and supply chain. I mean, this is the problem. You always know something is going to go wrong. Nothing ever goes exactly according to plan. Even in Venezuela, one of the helicopter pilots got shot to shit I think it was on the way out, right? It's a miracle he didn't die.
Yeah.
Imagine how different it is. I mean, think about the Bin Laden raid. Always one of the most highly helicopter pilot. If you don't have the best trained guy in the world in that seat at that exact moment, everybody on the chopper dies,
oh my
right?
God.
It's a different world.
Yeah.
If half the Navy SEALs get killed, and it's a nightmare, and then the Pakistani military arrives, history turns on a dime, and you never have any idea. And especially if you have all of these guys, a multi-week bombing campaign, it only takes one thing to go wrong. And look at think about the U-2 spy plane crisis, with the Soviet Union. Like, it was the greatest plane in the history of the world. Boom, gone, shot out of the sky. Now we're doing Bridge of Spies, like swapping people in West Germany. Like, you always have to hope for the best, plan for the worst. And I've seen enough now over the years just to know, like, all it takes is one or two different things. And we can you imagine if one thing goes wrong, or if some civilian tanker, misses the mine and gets blown up, and, several Americans are like, we're going to be living in a different universe. Like, that's troop level deployments and all of that. And you can't look to the people who are in power and are like, oh yeah, they're definitely looking out for all of our interests and trying to turn down the dial. Like, no, this is bad. All right. And then the last thing, I know we've been talking for a long time. A12, can we put that up there on the screen? I just wanted to show you all what the Secretary of Defense is up to. So yesterday, as all of these carrier strike groups and all of that were moving there, Secretary Hegseth joined Dr. Oz for a beachside brunch, hanging from trees, doing cold plunges for a leisurely afternoon, quote, into a Maha extravaganza with tree pull-ups, a cold plunge, and a Mediterranean feast. So really glad to see the Secretary.
So nice for him.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your service. Last thing.
Also shows you how essential this administration thinks he is to their planning, too.
Not just that, but how tone deaf are these people? And this is why whenever I'm talking about them, I just say they are so disconnected from reality. And I think that's part of the reason why they haven't bothered to try and sell us on any sort of manufactured consent on this one at all, and try and, get us to buy in. And instead they're just kind of hiding it, and then it's just going to get sprung on us, is exactly for this reason. I think these people are just so disconnected, and they don't understand how this looks to anyone who's not part of their little club. Like, they just go, oh, we don't really care, we can make social media posts and look how great that we're all hanging out. And it's like, no, like, what are you guys doing? You guys seem insane. Like, this is not what you should be doing right now, as you have such a huge buildup of troops in the area. Like, you should probably be focused on your job. What are you doing? And that's just, again, why constantly I say, like, these people drive me nuts. Like, they're so detached, and I think it's honestly a detriment to themselves, because I think the more that this stuff is exposed and we see it, it just infuriates the public against them in an aggressive manner.
Last thing we'll put up here, major shout out to, again, the heroes of our time, Ro Khanna, Thomas Massie. Let's put that up there on the screen, the last element. They are now introducing a war powers resolution to debate and vote on a war before putting U.S. troops in harm's way. I will make a motion to discharge a force and vote on it next week. So hoping that this will actually come to pass. Thomas Massie, Ro Khanna, bipartisan resolution.
And that's how it should be. And just because of the Iraq war, they don't want to do this anymore in Afghanistan. Like, all these things, right? The pullout from Afghanistan, like, they all look stupid for anyone who is behind it. So what they want is plausible deniability, where they don't have to actually be accountable to voting for these sort of military actions. So instead, they just go, oh yeah, it's just the president can make the decision on it. So it lies on the president's head for the unpopularity of these actions. And the problem with that is, it's Donald Trump's second term. He doesn't have to be accountable to anyone. No one really cares unless the Democrats romp and they're able to, impeach him and subpoena him and all these sorts of things. But they won't do that because all of them are implicated, because they don't want to actually vote on it anyway. So it would be just performative at best. It would more likely be around the Epstein files and these sorts of things. But all of them want to go along with it, but not actually have to vote on it and be seen to be basically at the beck and call of the military-industrial complex. That's exactly what it is. And so, yes, exactly. What can you say? It's completely insane. And quite frankly, I do hope that they get this passed, because it shouldn't just be Trump can just, oh yeah, we just go in. No, they have to vote on it, and they should be held accountable for voting to go to war. Because again, this does not serve anyone in the United States. All it will do is literally just cause more inflation and screw over raise energy prices and screw over all Americans. Like, this is not good for anyone except for Israel.
Terminate the use of U.S. forces from hostilities against Iran without congressional authorization, which of course is like the final thing. There has never been a buildup or a potential military action like this ever in United States history of this magnitude without any congressional authorization. And by the way, it's not that the congressmen all support it. They just don't want to vote for it so that you hold them accountable for it. Let me make that clear too. Outside of like 5 people who are in the U.S. Congress, they love this. They all support it.
Yeah, I saw Senator Mark Warner, who, of course, Democrat of Virginia, Ken Klippenstein was clipping him saying, like, oh, I'm glad the president's keeping all the options on the table.
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
this is our opposition party. That's fantastic. But shout out to Ro and Thomas Massie, the dynamic duo. And one dynamic that Massie was highlighting in Politico interview that I hadn't completely thought of, he thinks there are going to be more Republican dissenters like himself going forward after primary season. And in particular, one dynamic I had not thought of is, Trump did this big redistricting push.
Yeah.
You are going to have some Republicans who are redistricted out of their seats.
Good point.
They're going to be like, fuck you.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they'll have to think about like, oh, if I piss off the president, no, not primary, but what about my post-Congress job prospects? If I'm not in good with the administration, they'll have to balance that. But I did think that was an interesting note for him, that he expects in the future there could be more room, more Republicans who are retiring, who lost their primaries, who got redistricted out of their seats, et cetera, who might be more open to taking a dissenting line.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath.
Yeah, and I think that's entirely possible, right? Because, again, as I had just recently said, this is Trump's second term. How much power is he actually going to wield once out of office? I think him being the president and then him being no longer consequential to your survival as an elected official, I think those are two very different things, right? Because while he's in power, he's going to command more attention, he's going to wield more power. But, and the other thing is too, is Thomas Massie, if he survives his, primary challenge here, Marjorie Taylor Greene, like there are other people that have laid out the frameworks for how you can survive and gain popularity from standing up against Trump. And so if it is seen that that is a viable strategy, and not just that, but if Thomas Massie goes ahead and romps and wins by a huge margin because he is so popular, then other people get that in their head and they go, oh yeah, there's room, there's a lane for me to do this exact same thing. So yeah, it will be interesting to see after the midterms if, okay, yes, you don't actually need to just, get walked all over and go along with exactly what Trump says. And if there is no concern of, okay, well, after, this term, my term in office, Trump will also be out. And by the way, the Republicans in 2016 were not particularly happy with him possibly being their nominee. Like, you have to go back a ways now, like that's 10 years ago, right? But if you were to actually go back and think about, where were they? Did they actually want him? Like, they were all panicking. How many never Trumpers? Even J.D. Vance was a never Trumper. Like, all of these people were never Trumpers who now have kind of folded up behind him because he has the power and because he has shown to be someone who drives people out to go out and vote. But once he's on the outside, do these people just immediately flip on him and just, stab him in the back? I think that's a very real possibility. So, and I'm talking metaphorically, right? So, yeah, they actually fight out against him in whatever things he's trying to do, not in military action because they all love that. But yes, exactly. Do they for Maha or anything that I think is good, do they then stab him in the back and now, okay, we're just going to sell out once again to pharma, right? We're going to actually go along with that. We're not actually going to, So who knows? Who knows? It could be very interesting. And I'm not saying it's for the good, right? I think it's actually in the direction of the bad. Like the few things that we are actually getting that are good for the American people, in my opinion, I think they just all sell out and then go, to whatever lobbyists are paying them the most money. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right. And that was mostly what I wanted to cover. Once again, I just thought it was very important because of the buildup in and around Iran, right? And I think the interesting situation that Trump finds himself in, I think it is overwhelmingly likely, 90% plus chance that there is some sort of action that happens. I think watching it as it unfolds will be very interesting to see what line we take. And I think it's pretty much unavoidable at this point in time. So with all that said, I will just say, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.